Hi, and welcome to the show. Subscribe at kevinmd.com/podcast. Today, we welcome back Dennis Hursh. He is a healthcare attorney who regularly appears on the show to talk about all things contractual. His latest article is What Independent and Locum Tenens Doctors Need to Know About Fair Market Value. Dennis, welcome back to the show.
Hi, Kevin. Thanks. It's great to be here.
All right, so what's your latest article about?
It's an issue that I've seen a lot of physicians struggling with is what exactly is a locum tenens physician worth? It's fairly easy if you're employed. We have MGMA, we have other benchmarks, and it's pretty easy to look it up and just see what's a salary for an employed physician in any given specialty. Locum tenens, though, don't have that. And a lot of times I see it's just kind of wild west of kind of tough negotiations. And so my article is about different ways that you could look at to see what a locum tenens is worth.
And I'm sure every physician is familiar by getting text messages and emails from locum tenens recruiters, and it's really just kind of an arbitrary number that they're given X amount of dollars per hour. And you're right, there's no way to really judge whether that's a fair offer or not. So talk about your article in terms of what goes into the thinking about determining whether some of these locums offers are fair or not.
Well, I think you have to look at what you're making. I was actually at a conference for locum tenens physicians, and one of the physicians inadvertently got included in a chain from the locum tenens company, and the company was making 7 times what they had offered the physician. It was obviously a very desperate hospital that was willing to pay a huge amount of money, and the locum tenens just said, "Hey, this is what we're paying." And shockingly, the money wasn't that far below what the physician had seen in other instances. So there's a huge amount of money being made by locum tenens companies, and that's fine. I mean, a few bucks for their services is fine, but they should not be getting 7 times what the physician is getting. So I think there's a couple ways of looking at it. And something that usually, when you tell physicians Stark Law, usually what they hear is the Stark Law is something that allows a hospital to not pay physicians well. But actually, Stark Law is kind of helpful in this instance because the Stark Law says that two things: it has to be what two well-informed parties would negotiate without considering the value of the referrals. And of course, the problem is locum tenens usually are not well informed. So you've got kind of a information deficit on the one side of the negotiation. But the other thing is that Stark Law also talks about something being commercially reasonable. And commercial reasonableness is very helpful because it makes it clear in the regulations that a deal does not have to be profitable to be commercially reasonable. And that makes sense. If a hospital has to have EMPLA, has to be able to deliver babies, obviously they need to have an OBGYN there. Maybe that OBGYN won't even see any patients that night. You still have to have them there. So you can't argue, a hospital can't say, well, we have a low census, so you're not going to be doing that much. So we're not collecting that much. And they'll always play the Stark card. So of course, since we're not collecting that much, we can't pay you. So there's the hospital desperation, I think, factors into it. But I think it's fairly easy to come up with a bottom line. And for me, that's just look at what an employed physician would cost that hospital. I did in the article just an example of what a family medicine without OB would make. And just using national benchmarks, I described it in the article, but to sum up, it's you take their salary, you look at how much PTO they have. There's 2,080 hours of work in a year. You take out their PTO, and then you divide that number by the salary, and you come up with an hourly rate. You also got to figure that benefits are 25 to 30% of the cost of an employed physician. So you gross it up by that much. And then I think it's also fair to say an employed physician will get a signing bonus and relocation allowance. So you can add those amounts. Again, a lot of times they're amortized. So to be fair, say take half that amount and add it up. You do the math and you come up to a figure of a little over $216 an hour for a family medicine physician. I think it's important because that's way over. A family medicine physician median total comp is 300, as little under $300,000. If you take that $216 by 2080, you see it's a lot more than an employed physician makes. And I think that trips up a lot of physicians. They're saying, oh, at that rate, I would make this much per year. But it's not what you would make, it's what the hospital would pay, which is a very different number.
Now, all this information, how readily available are they so physicians who receive these locums offers can make those calculations?
Well, it's something I do based on MGMA data. But as you say, all you have to do is look at your inbox. You're probably getting these numbers constantly. If you want it or not, I'm sure you're getting plenty of recruiting. Even if you've been able to opt out of all those recruiting emails, I think you can still just go onto any job board and get some sense of this is what they're paying. And again, you're going to see what the signing bonus is and so on. And you can just kind of back into that, what an hourly rate is, again, assuming 25 to 30% overhead for expenses.
Now, realistically, how much can one negotiate with a locum tenens offer when it comes to that hourly rate?
It's going to depend. If you're in a fairly well represented specialty, and if there's an opening in Manhattan, probably not very much at all. If you don't want to be there, there's plenty of other people that do want to be there. But a lot of these offers aren't for Manhattan. If it's in, northern Michigan, physicians are paid extraordinarily well up there. And it's not because the North Michigan hospitals are such wonderful people. It's just you can't find that many physicians that want to spend, 5 months out of the year on snowshoes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to very much be dependent. Yeah, if it's a place where a lot of people want to be, Manhattan, San Diego, there's probably not much flexibility there. But for most of the country, there is a lot of flexibility.
So, other than the hourly rate, what are some other factors that physicians need to consider when evaluating locums offers?
Well, I think you have to look at what expenses they pay. A good locum tenens agreement will cover housing. It'll cover things like car rental. And you got to look at the details like that. I've seen some that say you're working Monday through Friday, so we'll cover a rental car from Monday through Friday. Well, the problem is, and we'll cover hospital Monday through Friday. Well, the problem is you're probably going to fly in Sunday. You're going to need to get your car Sunday. If you work Friday, are you going to then jump in your car, drive to the airport, return the car, and fly home? The answer is probably no. You're probably going to need sleep. So you're probably going to need rental car and hospital for a little bit of overlap over your time period. So those are the things. But the things that I see physicians mostly getting, I think, unfairly taken advantage of is the actual rate they're being paid.
And in terms of these contracts from locums companies, again, I know that you're speaking from a specific lens. Do you recommend having an attorney review these locum contracts before signing anything?
Yeah, I do. And again, yeah, that's what I do. So obviously I recommend it. But as I said, it was an eye opener for me. I knew locum tenens companies made a lot of money, but just the idea that if you find a hospital desperate enough, you can get 7 times what a physician is being paid. That was a real eye opener for me.
So, can you tell us a successful case study where you negotiated or you've heard of a negotiation where a physician meaningfully moved that initial hourly rate offer up because of some of the things that we're talking about? What would be a successful case study of that?
Well, yeah, I have had some where they just came in and said, "Hey, take a look at this." And I said, "Well, I'd have a product that I do, but where I just said, look, for a physician in your specialty employed by a hospital at this location, this is what the hospital would be paying." And we didn't get a lot over that, but that was significantly more than the initial offer. And I know that in other instances, I've heard of people being able to double the initial offer. And again, you have to look at how desperate is the hospital for it. And I think it's smart to ask some questions. Are you having any trouble recruiting? I mean, it's one thing if you say one of our physicians got pregnant and another became disabled and something like that. But if they've been recruiting for this position for 3 years, they're pretty desperate. And also, it might not be heaven on earth to work there. It could be, yeah, we're continually bringing in physicians, but we're churning them out pretty quickly too. Well, that tells you it's not a great place to work. So if you're going to go in there for some period of time, you should get a premium for putting up with that.
So, if for a physician who's negotiating with the hospital and perhaps using the locum tenens company as an intermediary, what are some ways that they can push that argument to budge on that initial hourly rate offer?
Well, I think you got to realize the locum tenens company is making money. And at this point, they've got a physician. They obviously have the position to fill, and now they've got a physician ready to fill it. So usually they should be willing to give down to cut a little bit. I mean, it's one thing, if I know that I'm going to make, I don't know, 20% off this placement, I might be willing to go to 18% or 10% even, knowing that if you say no, that's just too little for me to work. Now I have to go out and start recruiting again. And that the hospital may very well have put a deadline on the locum tenens company. We want somebody at this date. So they're under some pressure too. And again, they're making a lot of money on this. And it's at this point, it's easy money. They've done the work to find a position. They've done the work to find the physician to fill that position. At this point, they may be able to cut back their profit margin a little bit.
So, other than simply just accepting the initial monetary offer at face value, what other big mistakes do you see physicians make when dealing with locums offers?
Well, locum tenens companies are nice. I mean, they certainly, it makes it easy for you. You can sit and just open your email. But I know a lot of physicians now are doing direct contracting. They're cutting out the middleman. So you could consider, I really want to go to this place, wherever, Arkansas. Just start looking at job boards. And if Arkansas wants to hire a physician in your position, they may be amenable to doing a locum tenens deal with you. And again, they probably can give you a pretty reasonable rate. You're still probably going to be way under what a locum tenens company would cost them. So if you can do direct negotiations, I don't know how, I guess I know what some physicians do, and I'm not sure that it's completely ethical, but it's certainly not illegal, is they'll get approached by a locum tenens company and they'll try and get as much information as they can. Oh, you say it's in Arkansas. Where is that? Little Rock. Oh, Little Rock. Well, tell me a little bit about the hospital. And once they do that, they can easily search, figure out what hospital it probably is, and then directly contact the CMO there and say, hey, I hear you're looking for somebody in my specialty. Let's talk. And again, your rate is probably going to be way less than the locum tenens company, even if you're making a very good rate.
We're talking to Dennis Hursh. He's a healthcare attorney. Today's Kevin MD article is What Independent and Locum Tenens Doctors Need to Know About Fair Market Value. Dennis, as always, let's end with take-home messages that you want to leave with the Kevin MD audience.
Yeah, don't undersell yourself. I mean, physicians are notorious for this and not knowing what you're really worth. Don't let Stark scare you. Stark is actually helpful in this instance, and just negotiate for what you're worth, and that may be a lot more than what an employed physician might be getting.
Dennis, as always, thank you so much for sharing your perspective and insight. And thanks again for coming back on the show.
That was my pleasure.